Hello, hi, and welcome. I'm just checking a few things. This is my first time doing a YouTube live, apart from the one I did this week as a little practice. And there might be some people joining me here on Zoom as well. And I am regretting the decision not to wear my contact lenses because I can see quite how much reflection there is. So I might do that. No, I won't. It looks strange. So, hi, and welcome to Pearl Howie's Pearl Escape Spring Summer 2025 program. Um, and this session is really all about explaining what it's all about. So, the spring summer program was something that I came up with when I was talking to a lady who works in education and who works supporting a lot of teachers. And we were talking about the fear of success instructor training that I run and how useful it would be for teachers. And at the same time, I was thinking about the level of the program that I did last year, which was to work with Claudia Woodford and to train her to train other people to run those trainings herself. And so what I feel is that the last sort of couple of years, I've been trialing different aspects and developing and having proof of concept of all the different aspects of um, the Fear of Success program, the Authentic Success program. And talking to her and thinking about it, I suddenly thought, you know what, let's put this all together in a program so that people can really take what they need from it. Okay. So, what I wanted to do was run a Fear of Success instructor training, which we're going to do on Saturday, the 17th of May. And when we've done that, anybody who does it and who trains and becomes an instructor then has the possibility through the course of those few months to get ready to train other people, and so to do a training for themselves, which I will then assess and sign them off as a trainer. So these kind of things, the training level and the instructor level, are certified programs, and so there is an element of assessment there as well, which is a bit trickier. But the basic level is the Authentic Success Your Way, which are the video workshops that I did. And I did the first ones of those during the pandemic, and they were the practical trainings. And so I put them on Udemy that were free during the pandemic for people to use, and thousands of people did them, and they got really great ratings. And I thought, okay, this is really working for people. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to redo them because the ones I did in the pandemic were just sitting in my living room, and I wanted to get out and give them more of a feeling that you would get if you were on a retreat. So if you were out doing a spiritual retreat with me. And I think the thing is with Pearl Escapes, I've been running this business for, it'll be 15 years this year, which is crazy. And when I decided to set this up, it all came from being on a trip, a spa trip with my sister. And and she was saying, what if we got to do stuff like this and we got to share this stuff, and this was our job. And when she said this, it kind of really lit a fire in me because I was exploring all these things. I was exploring spas and hammams and massage and things. And I really wanted to share those things. And I realized there were so many people around me who were always excited. They always wanted to know about that. How do you go? How do you go and have a massage? What do you do? And so I started telling people about it and writing about it. And I created the very first website, which had escape. So we had the Barcelona escape, which was the first one, and things like Croatia escape, all that kind of stuff. And and it really was also all about helping people to go on retreat, to go on an escape, which makes you realize like what's important and helps you to see and helps you to heal. And that's where all the learning about healing originated. And I think when I look back and I realize I've, since then I've been around the world and tried all kinds of crazy, I mean, even doing like a gong massage or two in Bhutan. And it's taken me really really long way. And it's wonderful to have written so many books about healing and to really sort of understand why we struggle so much. And that's what I'm so glad about when I talk about fear of success and I talk about authentic success, is that having done all of this work, I can really see, why we need all this healing, why we need all of that. Because living our lives, no matter how wonderful our lives are, we're always going to come up against things which are difficult to process and difficult to get through. And if we don't have the support and the tools and the resources to do that, we get stuck, And I was talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago at a networking session, and we were talking about really difficult things that we had been through. And as I said to him, and I say it in one of the video workshops, when I was younger, I had no idea why I found life so difficult. And if I look back at the younger me, the little me, my heart goes out because, I was dealing with a lot back then. And I think, how I felt was probably that I should find it easier and I should be able to deal with it and I should know what I was doing. And there was something wrong with me because I wasn't joyful and I wasn't um, happy, even though people around me would have said, I was smiling all the time and I wasn't really showing how difficult I was finding things. And I was just sort of bumbling through. And when I look back and I look at everything that I've learned, probably in the last 10 years, I realized that I had no way of dealing with stuff back then because I didn't know. I didn't know any of this stuff, and I didn't know how to deal with things like grief. I didn't know how to deal with complicated grief. And that's why I love what I do, because if I can make it easier for other people to understand and to work through these things, then that's everything. And I feel that gives me a kind of healing because, I'm healing, in a sense, what you could call my inner child. But when I'm helping anybody, whether they're a child or an adult or, somebody who's much older than me, it really makes my heart sing to help other people through anything, but particularly those things that I've really struggled with. And I think that's why a lot of us get into doing this kind of work, because, we want to help other people with the things because we understand the pain and we understand the suffering that comes with grief, with things like PTSD, with things like survivor guilt, and also imposter syndrome, which are all things that I touch on both in the fear of success instructor training and in the authentic success your way. So just to talk a little bit about authentic success your way is a series of 7 video workshops. And if you go on YouTube, you'll see the first 3 are already like live and you can do that anytime you want. And there's also a lot of short clips as well on the short, so you might have seen those before. And you can do them in any order and you don't have to do them all, but they are, I would say, step by steps. They're workshops. Okay, so some of them are not really exactly steps, but say for example the one on other people, that's a really challenging one. Okay, and that's why I put it in the middle. So you don't have to do them in any particular order, but the reason that one's in the middle is because I think that's one that people find really, really difficult. So if we start at the beginning, then hopefully by the time you get to the other people workshop, you've kind of already learned how to deal with some of the things that are coming up. and learn to sort of not just push down your feelings, but to allow them and to feel them. And that's really, awareness is really key to thinking about how we feel so that then we can deal with it. Because very often we don't feel our feelings because as I was saying about when I was younger, is I couldn't really feel my grief because it was also complicated and difficult, and I couldn't even begin to feel my feelings. So it took me a really long time to sort of open up and start to feel things that have been pushed down. And I think that's true for a lot of people. But as we start to allow those feelings to come up, often it can feel so very raw. And that's why we do these things in really beautiful places with wonderful people around us. And I recorded those workshops at Croucher's Hotel, which is in, I don't know where it is. It's on the peninsula, on the just down from Chichester, and it's a really amazing place and really kind people. And being in spaces like that when you're going through stuff is incredibly helpful, because sometimes we just need to be able to go and get a cup of tea and not have to fight our way through as you might do at like a festival or something. So there's a big difference. I see a lot of festivals in the summer, well-being festivals, and I'm sure some of them are great, but the ones I've been to have been kind of challenging. And it's kind of like, is that really a place for healing if I have to struggle with the environment? Sometimes it is. Sometimes the best ways of healing are in a challenging environment. For example, something like doing the Camino de Santiago. So sometimes when we're working towards our authentic success, uh, we might find that we're drawn to doing something that's like a physical challenge, maybe running the marathon. And sometimes we have an idea of something we want to do, and we can't really explain to anybody why it's important to us. And that's okay, because we don't necessarily have to. A lot of people like to do Ironmans, or triathlons, or um, Zumba convention, which is kind of a marathon of its own. And very often we get something very special from that we can't anticipate. We can't preview it. And it's only when we get there and we're doing something that we can really feel it. We can feel it on our skin, and we know if it's the right thing for us or not. And sometimes even the wrong thing can be very, very healing, because it takes us to a place where we say, no, I don't want this anymore. And that can be a very healing thing to do, to stick up for ourselves. I find sometimes, recently, I find that seems to be a pattern for me, that the act of actually standing up for myself and saying no is kind of, it's very healing. But it's also like, I kind of think I want I want it to be easier. I want to have an easier time of it, really. So anyway, those video sessions, they're available now. They're not all available on YouTube at the moment, but they are all available on my platform, which is Roshanara by Pearl Escapes. So if you've got my newsletter, you'll have a link. If you go to any of the videos on YouTube, you go down, there'll be a link, and you can just go in, put your email address, log in, and access all those courses for free, because I'm doing everything as a free to access, pay what you can when you can model. And that's just really because I felt a calling to do that, and a calling to do things in a more of a charitable way, uh, instead of necessarily getting paid by the people I serve. Things work in a more mysterious way, and I've decided to just accept that and go with that. So it's a great opportunity, because you can do all those workshops for free, and you can do the program for free as well. So there's seven workshops, and it's awareness, the dip, when we take a little tiny step into something that we feel drawn to, something that is pulling our heartstrings and see how that feels. And then we go into analysis, which is when we take those two things or just any experience that you've got, and we look deeper at what's going on in that situation. And very often we know we have these feelings, and we need to take the time to say, actually, what is happening for me in this? What's really going on for me in this? And the next one is the other people. And that's really looking at, and I always say it's so important when we talk about other people, that the goal is not to manipulate other people or get them, to do what we want. It's not about that. It's about looking at our relationships with other people and really looking at where we are using our relationships with other people to hold ourselves back. Okay? It's not about self-judgment, and it's not about self-blame, nothing like that. But it's about where we are not able to or not choosing to be true to ourselves. And it may be that you do this work and you still decide that you don't want to be telling people certain things, and that's okay, because there's a difference between honesty and privacy. Okay, so sometimes I think when we're doing sort of spiritual work and things like that, there's a lot of talk about sharing, and sharing can be wonderful, it can be so beautiful, but we're not necessarily in this, and certainly not in this program, to share all our sad stories. Okay, because sometimes that thing of coming together and everybody talking, a bit like being in a therapist's office, it can be quite negative, because we can start to get a bit of a bit competitive complaining, oh, this terrible thing that happened. And it's funny because I was looking on social media today and somebody was talking about this, and I'll share this because it's kind of general. And the person was saying that somebody had said to them, they were dealing with PTSD, and somebody had said to them, well, if you keep talking about the bad things, and if you keep focusing on the bad things, then you're going to feel bad. Okay. And Don Miguel Ruiz always says, he says this thing about having emotional wounds. And sometimes we need to open up those wounds and allow the poison to be released. But when we do that, sometimes we need to be away from other people, because we don't want to spread all that poison around other people, So we have to be wise, become wise in how we deal with those sad stories, with that emotional poison, and where we need to have somebody to talk to, where we need to just spend the time with ourselves and sit with things, and where it's time to focus on other things and move on. And it's very, very important, because just the way our culture is and our society is, that sometimes, the newspapers, or certain magazines, if you go to any newsstand, you'll see a lot of really awful stories being regurgitated and over, and it's a bit like, well, if you can get it up, then let it go, don't keep, yeah, that's the thing, is that release it, let it go, but we don't have to keep sitting in it. So it's very important to know what's the right thing for us in that situation. Okay. And then the fifth one of the workshops is, it's an action training again, and it's the dunk, and it's when we need to go all in on something. Okay. Now, I think sometimes when I watch, inspirational things, and, sometimes it's all about going all in. There's a lot of call for inspirational speakers, say, yes, go for it, and do it, and go for it. And that can be great. That can be really great. And I know that I've really benefited from those sessions, all those things in the past as well. But sometimes I would say, it's like when you go and do a dunk and you're jumping into the river, you must check the level of the river, So the dunk is all about safety, but it's also about thinking about where we're going to do a dunk. And when I say a dunk, it's like, some things you can't just dip your toe in. If I'm going to get on a plane and go to another country, I've got to go all the way. pretty much. You know, doing a dip would be looking at the flights and figuring out the pricing and this kind of thing. But doing the dunk is probably buying the ticket, going to the airport, actually getting on the plane. Honestly, there are times I've got on the plane when I was going to Hawaii from Vancouver, and we were in like, I say a snowstorm, I think it was a blizzard. And I remember sitting on that plane for a really long time before we took off. And I remember thinking, I remember thinking, if I'm going to get off I'm going to get off this plane. You know, I'm going to get off this plane, and I don't care that. And I think there was at least one passenger that did get off. You know, that did change their mind and and get off because it was such a horrendous flight. But generally speaking, when you get on the plane, you're gonna go. You're going all the way. So some things are like that. When we go and we take we go and sign up, we take the full dunk and we jump in and we do that. And so that session is all about that. And then the sixth one is development. And the reason I did a workshop on development is that sometimes what we need to look at when we're going towards our own authentic success is the structure of what we're trying to do and how complex or simple it needs to be or it can be. And there's a great expression that's been going around my head like this last few days, and it's from, I think it's from Saint, the first American saint whose name, I think it was her surname was Seton, woman, and she said, "Live simply so that others can simply live." And she was a great inspiration for the Scouting Foundation and the Scouting movement. But sometimes, that we have a tendency in society to be all more, 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 and that doesn't necessarily make us happy. And I'm not a Buddhist monk or nun, but I have got a bit of a Buddhist nun tendency within me, and I've definitely been to the Buddhist villages and societies and cultures that are very simple. And really, sometimes, it's really about letting go and having less, 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 rather than more, more, more. And development sometimes, I find, because I have a business and I deal with business development and other people, very often it's a question of gearing up and going bigger and doing more and doing more. And it's like, actually, does this serve me? Does this serve me? And I feel very called at the moment to the practices within, say, a Buddhist village, in that there is that success, that success of being a spiritual teacher is not necessarily like what we see on YouTube, which is, certain people, famous people, who are full of like, more, it's really big and it's kind of dramatic, and I can't really watch those videos. And so obviously I need to be a voice that speaks for what feels right to me and what I see other spiritual teachers do. And so, for example, when I go to a Buddhist village, and the practice is not always about more luxury or anything like that. The practice is balance, and it's the balance of sweeping the floor, as expression that you may have heard of, which is chopping wood, carrying water. That our practice is served by perhaps going really up here and being very our consciousness being up here and thinking about things in terms of reality, complicated and really deeply spiritual ways. But then we're also served by doing really simple, basic, mundane tasks like chopping wood and carrying water. And actually our heaven is as much in these daily simple tasks of putting the washing out, or making the bed, or taking a shower, or going for a walk. And so that development is really about thinking about how much do I really need. And I always say I get tempted by so many things. I always get tempted by the idea of, in some ways, going back to what I was doing, which was travel and working in different levels. And my great teacher, Don Jose Ruiz, has a saying, which is, may life protect me from myself. And so sometimes I sort of want all these things, and then I keep coming back down to earth because life grounds me. And I look at all this and I think, oh, but this is my heaven. Being able to live simply, walk down to the beach. This is the kind of thing. And if you watch the videos, the Authentic Success Your Way videos, you'll see what a beautiful place I live in. And so taking the time to go for those walks and be in the woods and just be relaxed and calm and easy, that is my heaven. And I don't need anything more in order to find that heaven. It's right here. And I think for most of us, there is that wonderful heaven right there for us. And so it's important that we don't get hooked on too much development and I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to do everything else. As much as it's sometimes nice to do wonderful, complicated, extravagant things, I'm sure I will be doing extravagant, beautiful, wonderful things very shortly. But one of the expressions I use in that particular workshop is rewilding. So sometimes our development is actually about letting go and letting ourselves go back to our own nature and letting our seeing what our nature will actually do. And sometimes we're so afraid of what that will be. Like, so for example, if we are very used to having a structured existence and having a schedule and making sure we do this and we do that, and there may be a fear there of what will happen if we let go of that. What happens if I don't push myself all the time? What happens if I just go with the flow and let myself do what my heart feels? And sometimes that's our development, is actually seeing what will happen if we allow things to, say with a field, if we were a farmer, what happens if I let this field go fallow and I don't plant it and I don't treat it? What if I just see what happens when I let nature take its course? What happens in this experiment? And life is, as we could say, kind of an experiment. And the last workshop is adaptation. And Charles Darwin said, adapt or die. And a lot of us have spent our lives adapting and fitting in and conforming to whatever we needed to conform to in order to survive. So what's really important, for example, I was thinking about this, it's a bit like being a chameleon. A lot of us are chameleons and we change our colors to fit in with people. And what happens when we stop? What happens when we stop using those fitting in strategies, we stop using those coping strategies, and we start just being ourselves and doing what we want to do and being who we want to be? And that's what that workshop is all about. So there are 7 workshops and you can access them right away. But the support sessions, what I wanted to do with these Wednesday evening support sessions is to provide, again, support, mentoring for people who are doing those workshops, and also for people who have done the training who then want some support to get ready to be trainers themselves. And that's why the summer program has been created, and that's what it's all about. And I want to say, like, any questions? Has anybody got any questions? Um, but I think that's probably it. So that's my little explainer, my little welcome. And I hope you will join me. Do email me, get in touch if you want to know any more, or if you want to, uh, as I say, the links are there for you to join Roshanara. And the training is going to be on this Saturday, the 17th of May, 12 till 4 p.m. online London time. So just give me a shout if you want to join us for that. And other than that, enjoy your evening and enjoy this beautiful day. Okay, you take care. Lots of love and see you